Hey y'all, my kindergarten class has given me another haircut this year. I have not had my haircut since June 1st of 2021. My kindergarten class cut it last time. They are going to cut it again. A different group of kindergartners are going to cut it again the last week of school, and we're doing so to raise money for the San Antonio Food Bank. So if you can afford to donate and you are interested, that is the link. There's pictures of last year's haircut, including kids holding up chunks of my hair like scalps, which is probably not a good thing, but they were doing it in the picture anyways. Proudly holding up big chunks of my hair. But anyways, thanks. On to this video. Hello, my name is Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, currently ranking and reviewing the 26 Frank Zappa tours that I have deemed worthy to be called tours. And we are now in the top 5, number 5, heading from 26 all the way to number 1. And this is Spring 75, the Bongo Fury Tour. Bongo Fury. This is the tour that can be heard on Bongo Fury. This band can only be heard on Bongo Fury. And one track on You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore, Volume 4. Torture Never Stops, an early 12-bar blues version of the Torture Never Stops. Just like this blues riff. An interesting early version of Torture. You can hear that on stage 4. Other than that, you can hear a very interesting, oddly edited, sequenced bunch of songs from this tour on Bongo Fury. I try not to organize my thoughts before sitting down to make this video because for me, when I think of this tour, I think there's an element of sort of chaos and like a very rough edge feel to these shows. There was some absolutely amazing playing. Like one of the songs this band plays is Echidna's Arf of You, but they don't play all of Echidna's Arf of You. They just play that really hard last like 45-second part, which is tagged on to the end of Poofter's Froth, Wyoming, Plans Ahead. So that's kind of this band in a nutshell. Is a common sequence was Poofter's Froth, Wyoming, Plans Ahead, a country and western Captain Beefheart song, into the hard part of Echidna's Arf of You, frequently then dropping off into just George Duke improvisation. That Montana thing now kind of was just floating, and it a couple times appeared at the end of this little run. So that's kind of this band in a nutshell. It's very, very chaotic. I think if you look at who is in the band, it is very much a very weird crossroads of Frank, old school Frank and new school Frank. The song list is a weird mix. Everything about this tour is strange. And listening to shows, there is this sense of like, oh my gosh, anything can happen. Sometimes it does. There's a lot of improv, a lot of just really random weird moments. And this tour also contains, and I'm actually giving it props for containing this, the worst Frank Zappa song ever. Never released officially, and that's a good thing. But the worst Frank Zappa song ever. And we'll get to that later. But who is in this band? So this is Frank Zappa on guitar and vocals. You still have sticking around, have been with the band. These allergies are getting bad. Sticking around with the band since 73, since the beginning of 73. Tom Fowler on bass and George Duke on keyboards and vocals. They would now be playing with their third drummer, Terry Bozzio, on drums. This is his first tour. The saxophone flute singer is still around, Napoleon Murphy Brock. He has been there since fall 73. This would be his last tour. This would be this would not be Brock's last tour. This would be Fowler's last tour, Tom Fowler's last tour. This would be George Duke's last tour. Bruce Fowler is back. He had been around for almost all of 73 and 74, but was not there in the summer and fall of 74, a tour I have not yet reviewed. Danny Wally makes his first appearance on slide guitar. He would leave and play with Beefheart in the fall. He would come back in 78 and 79 and then do recorded stuff with Zappa. And then who else? And then, of course, you have Captain Beefheart on vocals and reading poetry. You want to read one of your poems, Dawn? And sometimes, only occasionally, getting the lyrics to the words right, as Frank points out on stage. Shaming the beef in front of everybody. But anyways, I think Beefheart's energy sort of dominates this tour. It just feels chaotic from the get go. The set list is so crazy and all over the place. It just feels so random. There's a couple little moments, like especially they do a couple Beefheart songs, like Orange Clawhammer gets a sort of full band reading on one of the shows during a jam, and what I think is Pound for Brown on the Bus. Beefheart starts singing the lyrics to that song of his off Crazy Little Thing. He starts singing that Clear Spot song. During the beginning of Deborah Cadabra, a lot of the performances, and this is not on the Bongo Fury release, there's this little sort of guitar solo instrumental section that kind of sounds like Japan in a Dishpan, Beefheart track. So a lot of Beefheart energy seeps in, and of course there are songs in which he's reading his poetry or reading his lyrics, and Frank's conducting the band over it. And that kind of the same every night, but there are little deviations in what Frank conducts. Just a band. There's only a handful of tapes out here, but every tape I have heard, I enjoy and really love, and the sound quality is not that good. And it does appear, I mean, the only thing the Zappa Family Trust has released nothing from this tour. The only thing Zappa has released from this tour all came from the same Austin shows. So maybe there's not anything in the vault, which would be an utter travesty, because this is some phenomenal stuff. Where can you hear it? Like I said, the only place you can really hear this is on Bongo Fury, and then that one track on stage 4. However, I know streaming on Spotify, possibly streaming on other streaming services, there is a bootleg that is out there called The Muffin Man Goes to College. It is of the 426 Providence show. Really good example, really good, strong sounding boot, not the best. However, if you stream it on Spotify, you have to make your own playlist, because whoever uploaded it to Spotify, it's a 2 CD boot, and they just did it. So now the tracks are 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 2C, 1C, 2C. So you have to every other track is the first, second, third track on the other CD. So it's not in order. So you have to re-playlist it. But it's out there on Spotify if you want to hear a full show from this tour. What were the songs that they played, you ask? Because that is kind of where the weirdness comes in. So this is sort of a typical set list that this band would play, and then I'll throw in other songs and talk about the stuff. A lot of times it opened up with improvisation. The band would come on stage, sometimes without Frank, start making some weird, crazy noises. There was definitely sort of a monster song vibe to this at times, in that it went a lot of weird different places, and these were not just noodling openers. They were some pretty engaging music. Then Frank would come out, or Frank would be there, and he'd play the guitar, and then that would jump into several different things. Sometimes it jumped into apostrophe a couple times early in the tour, which was phenomenal. Tom Fowler getting a chance to really show off. Many times it jumped into Camarillo Brillo, with Frank all of a sudden playing that da-na-na-na-na-na on his guitar with a really heavy metallic sound. Early on, or at some point in the tour, towards the end of the tour, they started playing Muffin Man here as an instrumental. So they would play the improvisational opening, and then they do the Camarillo Brillo with the fast half, and a really, 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 really slow second half. And then at the end of the second half, it would be ripping into ripping into Muffin Man, but no vocals, just a guitar solo. Really the best version of Muffin Man, if you ask me. The best version of Camarillo Brillo, possibly. Maybe the 74, 73 with the jam at the end might have been better Camarillo Brillos. But these are really good Camarillo Brillos. Would never be the same after this. They'd be sort of throwaway encore numbers. This is the first time, the last time the song's getting all of its respect. So Then, depending on the show or at certain shows, Stinkfoot would pop up at some point. Sometimes Stinkfoot came up out of the improvisation and there was no Camarillo or no Muffin Man. You got Stinkfoot, your typical Stinkfoot, still a fun song to hear at this point. Carolina Hardcore Ecstasy, which is a little bit longer and a little bit slower on this tour. This is kind of a rough one to sit through. I think the verses, I think there's like extra lines where they sing the choruses twice, so it just feels a little bit longer. But the solos are still pretty interesting and still pretty good. But this is a weird song. It just, sometimes it works depending on the sound quality of the tape. Sometimes it just seems to drag on and on and on. So I'm, again, not sure about this song, but it is a good song. It's just these early versions are kind of clunky. Saved by just the raw sounding edge of this band. I'm not satisfied. Another just awesome random song choice. I wish Frank had not connected this song to the other Freak Out songs in the following tour. I think as a one-shot deal, just I'm not satisfied. 3 minutes of great original Mothers. That's an awesome sort of set opener, a set mix. It just works everywhere in a set. Then we get, in many shows around this point of the show, the worst song Frank ever wrote. It is called Velvet Sunrise. It is essentially a very cocktail lounge, slow, sort of, I don't want to call it a jam. I don't even know what to call it. It's just a sort of an atmosphere that is set up, and then the singer saxophone player comes forth and sings the Velvet Sunrise, like it's all like schmaltzy. And then the Velvet Sunrise is a euphemism for a part of the female anatomy. This song pretty much just gives Frank and the singer saxophone player a chance to talk about getting nookie on the road. Couple shows, Frank complains about how hard it is for them to score at colleges, how the college women don't want to put out, which these sort of like rants that are given in this song and the complaining about college girls followed up with sort of the Illinois Enema Bandit, college girls deserving, he kind of is, I'm not saying he's pro the Illinois Enema Bandit, but Frank isn't necessarily condemning the Illinois Enema Bandit. He went to jail because apparently he robbed one of them, Frank wasn't too condemning on that. So I have thoughts on that, which I'm not going to get into, but I don't think it's a good look. I don't think it's a good look, this continual harshing on college-educated women and their unwillingness to be groupies. But anyways, that's not the only reason the Velvet Sunrise is the worst song ever. It's just musically dull, way too much of the singer saxophone player going off. I don't think Frank's rantings are all that funny. It's just kind of dead air in the middle of like many of these shows. However, Frank every once in a while is still funny, and it only adds to the utter chaos of this tour. And as much as when I listen to these shows, when the Velvet Sunrise comes, I'm like, should I skip it? Because now that we're in digital technology, it's easier to skip things. And I don't, and it just seems to like make the whole journey better. But man, it's just, I don't think it's a good song. So convince me I'm wrong. I mean, like, I want to appreciate it. I want to like it. I want to appreciate the vibe Frank's going for, but I just can't. Yeah. So typically that would be followed by what is one of the best things this band does, A Pound for a Brown on the Bus. Other than the original, not the original, but the 68, 69 Mothers and their version of Pound for a Brown on the Bus, I think this one sounds the best. Why was George Duke not allowed to play this song for the past 2 years, and Bruce Fowler on bass, and now Bozio's on drums? I mean, I always think any band's performance of the main theme to Pound for a Brown or the Pound for a Brown are one of the most interesting moments of any band's repertoire, if they do Pound. The way it sounds with Duke's keyboards and Fowler's bass and Bozio's drumming, that intro is just phenomenal. And the idea that maybe there's an officially like really good sounding version of this out there would just be would be heavenly. But again, we get an amazing sounding Pound for a Brown on the Bus, and then we get some solos. We get trombone, so Bruce Fowler gets a chance to shine, a Duke solo, sometimes Bosio, sometimes Fowler. We get some nasty closing solos from Frank on guitar, and sometimes, to just further make this tour the weirdest tour ever, we get Sleeping in a Jar. The band just does the Sleeping in a Jar closer, as we would normally get with Pound for a Brown back in the 60s and early 70s. So just, yeah, Pound for a Brown had not been played since then, since, 70, since the Flo and Eddie era. So it makes sense that we still got Sleep in a Jar. Frank would drop that after this tour. It would no longer be around. But that's just one of the, all right, that's a random, just kind of forgot about that. And it's neat to have it back with Pound for a Brown. Then sometimes they would play Poofter's Froth, Wyoming Plans Ahead, which at the end of that, they would drop into the second half of Echidna's Arf of You, just that really fast part. And then that would sometimes drop off into the George Duke improvisations. Advanced Romance was played on this tour, probably the best version of Advanced Romance. Just the vocals with like Beefheart being on vocals, and you got, all the different vocalists who are able to contribute to this song. You got pretty nice jam sections in the middle with different people soloing. It sometimes got a little monstery. Frank gave the players a lot of room in this song. This had a very loose, fun Captain Beefheart chaos energy about it. Torture Never Stops is from this tour, that original 12-bar blues version. A couple times, at least once, there was a nice, really long jam at the end of it where they just kind of, I think Frank soloed mostly, but I think Fowler might have got a solo at that closing jam too. If I'm not mistaken, maybe not. No, I think it's mostly just Frank just jamming away at the end, and maybe some extra good Denny slide guitar on there. But there is one really good jammy version at one of the shows, and I'm forgetting which one it is. What else you get? Florentine Pogan was played on this tour, complete with guitar solo at the end, which is always a good thing. Dropping the guitar solo at the end of Florentine Pogan is something we should all mourn. And then Willie the Pimp was a common encore or closing number, show ending number with vocals, because guess who's here? The Captain is here, and he can sing his own song. And then, of course, Frank, of course, would play the guitar. So, and I think Denny also gets a chance to, it was an encore at every show, I wrote down. So they ended every show in like, Captain, Frank, Willie, as it should be. So, other things that were played, because there were some other really good, interesting moments on this tour. What were they? I covered that. Chunga's Revenge popped up once in the middle of a Pound for a Brown solo. Frank just starts quoting Chunga's Revenge. They do a little bit of a Chunga's Revenge jam. That was during a Pound for a Brown. I think it's the same Pound for a Brown where they also do the crazy little thing. Yes, this is the April 19th version of Pound for a Brown. Was actually quite a monstrous version. I mentioned Deborah Cadabra got played. Yeah, Cadabra got played in many a show. I just wanted to make, every time I hear this, I think of Lancashire Boulevard in Los Angeles. That's one of the lines in the song. I dated a girl in high school who, her mom was an insurance adjuster. And the number 1 and number 2 intersections in which you were most likely to have an accident, or which the highest percentage of accidents came from, in like LA County and Orange County and Riverside County and like all of the southern like empire, both those intersections were on Lancashire, right there in North Hollywood. The one that's like farthest east, right before like you're coming off the hill from where Universal is, and then there was another one farther towards the west. And I wish I could remember what the intersections were. But if you live in LA and you're driving on Lancashire, the 2 most likely to get in an accident intersections are on that, or at least they were in the 80s. Don't know if that's changed. Don't You Ever Watch That Thing was performed as, and it's now in its full Don't You Ever Watch That Thing form. Excellent solos in that. George frequently got a chance to do his thing. I think a couple times it was attached to Montana, but then he was also attaching it to the end of Poofter's, Echidna's, and then the thing. There was no Dupree's Paradise on this tour. That song had been dropped. But we still get George doing his stuff, which is interesting because now Bozio's on drums. Let's Make the Water Turn Back. It's played and it's kind of funky. It's almost a little too much of the singer singing, but it's still a pretty good version. It's got a really interesting sort of jam at the end. And it almost feels like, I think it's played at one of the Boston shows, and Frank announces that it's going to be played. And then at the end, it almost feels like they didn't figure out how to end it. And they just kind of like, oh, okay, we're just going to kind of just jam away for a while, and then things get weird, and then they go off into Penguin and Bondage. But that's pretty interesting. Montana gets played. Orange Claw Hammer gets at least one like full band performance. Penguin and Bondage is played. I think there's a Denny solo and a saxophone solo on this, and then a Frank solo. I think Frank also gets a solo on this. And so this is a sort of a little stretched out version of Penguin and Bondage. The song itself sounds great. Frank's able to do a lot with the band in those weird little moments. It sounds really good. Sam with the Showing Scalp Flat Top, which was pretty much the same lyrics. And then Frank would... There seemed like by the end of the tour, throughout most of the tour, there were parts that were the same every night. But Frank did deviate a little bit when he was leading the band through this. Token of My Extreme, the song, appeared as an opener a couple times. Eventually what it would be on... by the time it was on... Joe's Garage, we get the song, A Token of My Extreme. And that's about it for this. It is just a chaotic tour. It is just the weirdest set of songs. You get, sort of one monster song in Pound for a Brown, but you really like Advanced Romance could get monstrous. Penguin for Bondage had a lot of good jams. George was given a chance to just improvise at random points in time. The opening improvs were pretty, unpredictable at times. Frank's solos are very edgy. Beefheart doesn't always remember the lyrics to the words. Apparently, someone made a comment recently, Fowler apparently was not happy on bass all that much because Bozio and Frank were ignoring the one. And so we're starting to go way far out there. But no, it's an amazing tour, and like all of the tapes have a brashness about them that just adds even a further sort of cutting edge to the music. But they're just some of the most engaging, amazing, raw music Frank ever played. And it's just like you have old school musicians, like George Duke started playing with Frank in 69 on that Ponte album. And this would be his last run. You have a bunch of people from 73, 74. This would be their last run. Bozio is now here. He would be with Frank till 78. Wally is here. He would be in and out of Frank's orbit. Beefheart's here. We're talking high school, Zappa friend. It's like all of these different things are here, and the music... Bunch of new songs, bunch of old songs, bunch of songs that will never get played again. Thankfully, in the Velvet Sunrise, the worst thing Frank's ever done. It is just a weird tour. And the Bongo Fury album does not do it justice at all. Just at all, sadly. I don't think. So anyways, yeah, check this out. Other good shows that you can check out. Boston, both the early and the late show are pretty decent sounding. This is April 27th. There's a really good... the El Paso show. Jimmy Carl Black dropped in on the El Paso show, and they played Lonely, Lonely Nights and one other song at that tour. I'm So Fine. Is that the name of the song? It might be called I'm So Fine. Lonely, Lonely Nights. Those Lonely, Lonely Nights they played, and they did one other song that You're So Fine that Jimmy Carl Black sang. That's at the El Paso show, May 23rd. The 419th Passaic show, there's a good sounding tape of that out there. And then the 426 Providence, which is that Muffin Man Goes to College boot. I think I almost got everything that was played. There was probably a one-off song that I missed at once. So yeah, I think that's about it. Two things I did forget. The lyrics to 200 Years Old popped up a couple times. I think both times in like Advanced Romance jams. Maybe once in like a George improv, and then I think in an Advanced Romance improv. Either way, the lyrics popped up. I don't think the song did. And there was another song that I only have on a really, really, really bad sounding tape. A song called Portuguese Lunar Landing, which think it's about a Portuguese astronaut who sees monsters on the moon. I think that was played 3 times, or that we know of 3 times, and then dropped. But I think that covers all of the songs. There was also an Uncle Meat sort of jam tease in an improv. I don't think the full song was played. I think just part of it was played, but it was part of like an improv. I think that covers everything. But yeah, let's finish this video. Anyways, yeah, that's it for this tour. I've rambled on a lot. I don't know if we're ever going to get an official release from this tour, because it almost looks like the Austin show was the only thing, and maybe they can just release the Austin show in its entirety, and then we'll get a couple more, interesting songs that weren't released on Bongo Fury, but who knows. Anyways, I'm rambling. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your day, and yeah, I guess my grandfather's favorite team. And even when they moved to St. Louis, he rooted for them. It was the Los Angeles Rams. So in honor of my grandfather, I have to say, go Rams. All right, peace, y'all. Subscribe. Bye.